wait for everybody to get in. While everybody's joining, I just want to remind you that you can do questions and answers either in the chat box or in the Q&A. All of you joining are muted on video and audio, so please type your questions. The Goodwins will be answering those at the last 15 minutes of the presentation today.
Since 1992, Carolina International Trucks and ID Lease has supported commercial trucking with our 6 South Carolina locations, serving all makes and models of commercial trucks. We want to thank the hard-working heroes of the trucking industry. From drivers to technicians, these dedicated workers are the backbone of our communities, transporting and distributing supplies and food that otherwise would not be delivered. At Carolina International Trucks and ID Lease, we encourage you to thank a trucker and show them your support today. Trucking moves America forward.
Okay, good afternoon, folks. Here again, I'm Todd, SCTA's President and CEO, and today we hope not to worsen any Zoomitis you may be suffering from. This virtual meeting session focuses on cybersecurity. You know, right out of the gate, I want to thank, again, you saw on the screen, but I want to just read out our truck fund sponsors, McGriff Insurance Services, Carolina International Trucks, Omnitracs, Bunch Truck Group, Christopher Trucks, Excel Truck Group, the Pete Store, South Carolina, Worldwide Equipment of South Carolina. Truck Fund is an extraordinary support fund to help SCTA during these extraordinary times. Speaking of challenging times, we face threats from other kinds of viruses too, and increasingly. So our cybersecurity session, we have today here presents an extraordinary son-father tag team. Father Todd Goodwin on the left there, and son Nicholas Goodwin there with a big smile on his face from Ohio. We welcome you guys. Nicholas Goodwin is a licensed attorney in the state of Ohio, and while working as a risk management attorney for a hospital system, he witnessed firsthand the devastating effects of identity theft for businesses, employees, and consumers. In 2017, he co-founded DataGuard Partners LLC to act as a bridge between the law and the business community in cases of data breach liability. Todd Goodwin, on the left, owned a successful employee benefits brokerage for over 20 years, and since 2012 has been educating employers regarding the risk of identity theft. Todd is asked to speak across the country, educating employer groups, churches, businesses, trade associations like ours, and other groups about the real risks of identity theft and how to mitigate those risks. Todd's also a co-founder of DataGuard, and we welcome you, and the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Rick. And we really appreciate being asked to join you guys today. We do this for several trucking associations over the past couple of years, including Ohio, our own home state. But Taryn asked us about a month and a half ago or a couple of months ago to join you guys, and we're really privileged to do that. We want to talk to you very briefly about some of the things that you might not be thinking about. We do this a lot. As Rick was saying, we were asked to speak at a lot of events. And the main thing we want you to go away with is a few nuggets of some things that you might not be thinking about on two fronts. Number one, on the legal front. And we're going to give you some bonus information now, because as we all know, there are some very weird and strange things going on with regard to your business. And Nick has some awesome information and is keeping up with that from day to day, and how that kind of plays into cybersecurity. Another thing that we're going to talk about, and mainly I'm going to talk about, is a specific layer of cybersecurity that most businesses kind of overlook. And if you're the business owner and this hits you, either for your business or one of your key employees or yourself, it's a nasty one, and that is identity theft. And so it's an important layer, because the fact is that no matter what breach there is, and by the way, if you haven't had one, it's unfortunately just a matter of time. Nick's going to talk about that a little bit. But the fact is that at the end of the chain, I want you to keep in mind that the thieves that are after your data, it's very rare they're after things about your company. They're really after personal data, and it's for this thing called identity theft. So with that, I'm going to let Nick take over on this first part of the program. You're going to learn a lot.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to do some housekeeping items real quick before we get started. Number one, I am a licensed attorney in the state of Ohio. This whole presentation is more for general informational purposes. I am not your attorney. So you need to run this by your attorney. That's partly why we do what we do. But you need to run this by your attorney. Anything that you get from today may or may not apply to your specific company. So you need to talk to your counsel if you have that. And if you don't, then you may want to get in contact with us. We can help you with that. So before we get started here, I'm going to jump in a little bit. What are the lawyers?
By the way, if you don't mind me saying, by the way, guys, all of your questions, go ahead. We've got the chat box up, but in order to get through, some of your questions may be answered during this presentation.
Yeah.
We will get to your questions at the end. So go ahead and fill them in on your chat. We'll get to them at the end of the session. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So we're going to start off. We titled our presentation here, "What are the lawyers thinking?" And the short answer to that is not very much, because this is kind of, as many of you may know, this is kind of a moving target. The COVID situation that all of us are facing, and now even more with more of a societal upheaval that's going on, there are things that are changing constantly. So just want to make sure that you understand that things are always in flux, like they always are. So now is the time to have an attorney by your side. And I'm going to reiterate this later. If you don't have counsel right now, you really need to find someone that can stand beside you, particularly right now, because things are changing so quickly. So let's jump in. We're going to focus in on cybersecurity today. There are other legal considerations, and I'll talk about those at the end of this that you may want to add into your questioning for your counsel. But first of all, first things first, let's talk about cybersecurity before we get into the policies here that are on your screen. Cybersecurity is a word that almost means nothing these days because cybersecurity, if you ask different people, they'll give you different questions. Cybersecurity could be your systems. That's typically what people go after first, is your systems. It could be your people. It could be, you know, how they're trained, what they're actually doing, how they're using your systems. It could be the policies that you're using and that you have in place, if you even have those in place. So one thing I'm going to tell you right on the front end before we even jump into the material is that cybersecurity, you need to think about it as a layered strategy, okay? It's not just about a policy or a system, a security system. It's about layering in the different levels of security to try to mitigate as much as possible the likelihood that your information gets out there. So whether that's on the company level, you know, maybe you have confidential information you carry at the company level, or that could also be an employee's information, right? It could be information that you carry on your own employees just to be able to pay them or send them their their 1099 or W-2s, any of those types of things. So just understand, this is about a layered process. So we're going to start with the first layer here, and that's policies. It kind of starts, these are the things that kind of start at the top, and you may have already had discussions about these, but in the age of the coronavirus, all of us are talking about working from home. And one of the things that you need to understand, if you're a business that is working from home, and a lot of us are kind of forced to do that, you need to make sure that your policies for your employment records are up to date. You need to update those policies to make sure that they have some kind of work from home portion in them, and they need to reflect changes that you need to make and also expectations of your employees. What do you expect them to do? Just some examples of some things that you really need to consider putting into those policies. Required hours of work. I know that sounds like it's an obvious one, and that you may not even need to do that because it's kind of built into our the way we run business. But making sure that they're working the right amount of hours. And a lot of companies have included things like a work-life balance clause. In other words, you need to make sure that the employee understands that they're not required to work all the time when they're at home. You know, all of us have access to our devices and the ability to get emails and things like that. You need to make sure that you put in there that they're not required to work all the time, because we don't want that to come back in a liability suit with an EEOC claim or something like that. Expense claim processes. In other words, if you have employees who are working at home and they may need to run out to Office Depot or Staples or something like that to get office supplies, you know, what are your processes for that if they're not coming to the office? Something about this, what we're doing right now, how do you deal with virtual meetings? You know, do they have to wear something? What can they say on those meetings? Are they being recorded? Okay. You know, those types of things are things that you need to include into or think about at least including into your cybersecurity profile for working from home. Last thing is confidentiality. We're going to talk about this. This is a major issue. Some of you may have actually heard about Zoom itself having some problems earlier this year with this very thing. And I can tell you from the legal world, attorneys have been a little bit baffled. I don't know if you know a lot of attorneys, but if you do, some of them are advanced in age and some of them aren't. Some of the newer attorneys are used to using some of these systems, and they haven't really thought through, in some cases, how that information is being passed and who it's being passed to on the other end. Remember, this is virtual, so it's not, I can't really control who's in the room at the other end of a meeting. I can't control who's at the other end of the meeting sitting behind the camera. So making sure that those are in your policies and procedures is a very important thing. Something as simple as social media. You know, people are at home, and I know social media is the enemy of every business right now. But social media, you have to expect that your employees will spend more time in social media than they might have otherwise done in an office setting. I know in the trucking industry, it's a little bit different because you have drivers, and a lot of them we hope are professional drivers and they're not spending time on social media while they're working. But you know, when they take some of that downtime, or they're in your truck, or they're representing your company, you need to make sure that you have some professional standards that are in place on how they're going to use that social media. You want to make sure that whatever they're doing can't impact the brand or your confidentiality. I'm going to show you a picture here real quick. It's going to pop up on the screen here. I don't know if you recognize this guy or not. You may not, but this guy ran the Hawaii Emergency Management System for the federal government. And I noticed I said ran. Yeah, he used to run it. Because of this right here. This is a picture that was taken, and if you see the arrow at the bottom of the screen, when he took this picture and posted it to social media, that is his actual password to log into the Hawaii Emergency Management System. So their system was breached within an hour of him posting this picture to social media. Just want you to know that's the kind of thing that we're talking about when we're talking about social media posting, you know.
And you can't take that back.
Yeah,
right?
And you can't take it back. I mean, they changed the passwords and things like that, but people were already into those systems. So just keep that in mind. Things like that are what we're talking about. Last thing you want to consider, and these are not exclusive, by the way, you may have certain things in your state you want to include in here. So you want to talk to your counsel. But data and records management, big issue. And we're going to talk about VPNs in a few minutes. But working from home, a VPN is almost a necessity. I would argue that not using or not employing some type of VPN, if you are dealing with any type of confidential information with your company of any kind, that could be personal information as well, you need to have a VPN in place. The other thing that you want to consider is a private device data wipe. And some of you, that may not mean anything to you, but if you have employees that are using their own personal devices to conduct work, you want to have some type of policy in place on how you're going to recover data that they do. So let me give you an example. So that would be somebody maybe working on a quote or a confidential document on their personal laptops or maybe their personal phones. And while they're working on that, those things are being saved on their devices, whether they know it or not. Those things are being saved on their devices. So there are copies of those that are floating out there in cyberspace that could potentially be breached on their personal devices. So you need to have a way of controlling that if you're having your employees using those types of personal devices for your company's work. So we're going to jump over here and we're going to talk about equipment real quick. So equipment, what does that mean? So bring your own device. We were just talking about it literally just a minute ago. Bring your own device means your employees are using their own personal private devices to conduct business.
Like these.
Like these.
Right.
I've got a cell phone right here, and it basically controls my life. In fact, I heard somebody last year at one of our sessions said, my phone is the remote control to my life. And a lot of your employees, that's probably the truth. So if they're using their own devices, in other words, if you are allowing an employee to work on their own devices, there are some things that you really need to consider. First of all, and probably the most important part, is the software that they're using on their systems. You have to make sure that that software is being updated. You have to make sure that the operating system is being updated, their virus protection is being updated, just like you would do at your company on a company device. You need to make sure that they're doing that with their own devices. You need to consider things like, are those devices being shared with family members? Is the data on the devices they're using encrypted? Which for most of us, that's not the case. If they're using a private device, it's not the case. So you probably wouldn't want to allow an employee to take a piece of confidential information and put it on their private device. And that leads to other questions you may want to consider, like, do they even have access to that information at home? Weak passwords. That one is, we're going to talk about that again here in a minute, but weak passwords is an obvious thing you need to think about. Can they use a USB stick to take information? Most of our private devices, you can use a USB stick, or upload it to the cloud, or they can do a lot of different things with the data. So that's something you need to keep in mind if you're allowing an employee to do work for your company on their own devices. Also, staff using personal email to conduct business. If they can't access their business email accounts, that's a serious issue. If you're going to provide devices, and by the way, on the bring your own device, there are some things you can do to mitigate that. You should consider multi-factor authentication. A lot of us are doing that now. Those programs are relatively easy to put in place. Is there a way? There are ways now to where you can isolate the data on someone's personal laptop or personal device away from your company data. Also, a lot of companies are doing business in the cloud, so they have to sign into something to do things on there. So that's a way that you can help mitigate that. If you're going to provide devices, you just need to make sure that you understand that you have something that's logging file access. Make sure that you have, make sure if you're providing devices that they can be supported and updated remotely, because a lot of people aren't coming into the office. Have some data loss prevention software, things like that. You don't have to go through every one of these. Make sure you're using a VPN. In terms of the passwords, education is a big factor. I'm just going to tell you, Fluffy123 is not a secure password, or somebody's cat name. That happened last year. That's not a secure password.
We've actually seen that one.
I've seen Fluffy123. That's why I put it in there. Somebody actually had that as their work login password. So make sure that you're educating your employees. That's not a secure password. By the way, there are some easy ways that you can mitigate that. Have somebody pick out their favorite line from a movie and type that into there. That's a great way for somebody to remember it. And also, it's very secure because it's usually law. So if that's something that they can do, then that's great.
How about password vaults?
There's also the option of doing some password vaults. Those are relatively easy. I think for companies, they, depending on your size, you can get pretty good discounts on those. So that might be something to consider as well, using a password vault. Again, it all revolves around education and training when it comes to that kind of stuff, whether you're having them make it up or you have password standards that are in place or one of those things. That's the biggest factor to a thief being able to directly access your system, is through a password that isn't secure. Human factors. There's an obvious one here, guys, and that is that I'm a lot more likely to click on a link when I'm sitting on my couch at home that is suspicious than I am at work. And why is that? Because you've spent all that time training your employees not to click on links that are suspicious, but when they go home, a lot of times they don't take that with them. So just the environment that they're sitting in can actually impact whether or not they are willing to click on that link that they shouldn't click on. So just doing some training, additional training with them, reminding them that the standards that they're using at work are the same at home while they're there. So those are really big, can be a really big impact. Last one, only use pre-approved devices and networks. Making sure your employees understand you need to use the VPN if you're doing work, right? And I've seen a lot of companies that say, go ahead and use the VPN even when you're doing personal stuff, but because it creates, a lot of people's Wi-Fi networks that they have at home are not secured, or if they are secured, it's usually a phone number. I can tell you the largest cable internet provider in the country uses your phone number at your address as the password, as a standard. And I don't know how many people actually change those when they get those installed, but using a VPN is the way to go on this. There are some things you should consider when you're looking at using a VPN. Is it a commercial grade VPN? Is it something that, you don't want to just go out and buy one that you heard about on the radio today? You need to do a little bit of research on a VPN, make sure it's a commercial grade, make sure it's encrypting the information correctly. You obviously want to take into account speed, reliability of the VPN. And then this sounds ridiculous, but the host nation, where is the VPN being hosted at? If you don't understand VPNs, then you probably shouldn't be making that decision. So find someone, and we have partners that can help you with this, but find someone who can help you understand what that is doing for you and what types of factors you need to take into account. There are VPNs that are hosted in China.
Not a good idea.
Probably not a good idea to use those for your company. I'm convinced that part of our problem with our intellectual property theft in China is related to using VPNs that are hosted in those host countries. So just understand that that's one of the big factors related to VPNs. A simple one, screen locks. Something you can train your employees to do at home that can benefit you greatly is just having them, you can set up a policy to do this if you want to. I think it's probably a good idea to set up in your policies that the employee locks the screen when they leave. Something that simple. You just don't know who's in their house, who's looking in their windows. I know that sounds like, it's Big Brother-ish that somebody might be looking, but it's your data. You're on the hook for that data if it gets out. So
it only takes one time. Right?
Yeah, it only takes one time. So just make sure that you're paying attention to that. Something simple as screen locking a screen so that no one else can look at whatever they were looking at or navigate through your system while that person's in the bathroom or out at lunch or whatever. Last thing here, and this is a testament. 6 weeks ago, nobody was talking about this, but now it's becoming more of a regular thing, which is having an employee sign a pledge or / agreement. Some states won't let you do this, so make sure you talk to your counsel about this. But this is a great idea. It's simply really acknowledging, it's having an employee acknowledging that they understand that the policies that are in place at work are also in place at home. And they understand what's expected of them while they're at home, okay? This is really all about mitigating liability if something happens, right? The old joke about your attorney thanking you if you keep if you're going to keep a bat in your trunk, make sure you keep a ball glove so that your attorney will thank you later. Same thing applies here, right? So if you're going to give the employees the ability to work from home, which you almost have to, and I think it's going to continue on into the future, you need to make sure that you're protecting yourself with these policies and having them sign off on something, whether it's a pledge or an agreement that says, I understand that I'm not supposed to be doing these things and I'm supposed to be doing these other things. So that really can help protect you and help mitigate losses to potential cybersecurity threats that might pop up. And I say might, but honestly, in our day and age, they're going to pop up somewhere. So being prepared for that type of thing is important. Some other things you want to keep in mind, take into consideration that can actually help you mitigate from the cybersecurity side. Cybersecurity insurance. I know the last thing you want to do today is talk about insurance. But making sure these plans have saved clients that we've talked to literally millions of dollars in costs that company would have had to either get, or I know of at least 2 companies that have had a plan like this that would have been put out of business because of a breach, but they were saved by having these types of policies. One thing I will caution you on, if you're thinking about adding this to your layers of protection, make sure that you use a reputable agent. Don't just go to your P&C agent. If you call him and you ask him, do you deal with commercial cybersecurity insurance policies? He's almost always going to tell you yes, okay? Make sure that you get a good connection to somebody who works with these policies, because it's not just a matter of signing up for it. You also have to make sure that you're not getting excluded. So there are a lot of exclusions that are part of these plans, and those exclusions can prevent you from being able to access the funds from those insurance plans if something happens. So make sure you're using a reputable agent or a reputable company that is helping you to understand.
A good addition here is make sure if you right now have cybersecurity insurance, but over the past 3 months, because of what's been going on, you have changed your business model. So you've got people working remote. I think it's a good thing to put in here. Go back and have that reviewed. Have your attorney review that insurance policy, because to Nick's point, you may already be in the middle of some of those, we call them donut holes, where the policy won't pay because your employees aren't working in the same place and in the same manner that they were when you bought it. So,
right. So yeah, that's another really good thing. Make sure that you're going back and checking those, especially if you are thinking your model is going to continue the way it is.
Yeah.
One other thing, or a couple other things you can do. Identity theft protection benefits. That's one of the things I do. We provide these benefits, and it's really about preparation for an inevitable breach. And I know that sounds like we're just sold out to the idea that everyone's going to get breached, but quite frankly, in today's environment, unless things change, it's really just a matter of time. So when we say preparation for a breach, what we mean there is, if you have employee information that you're storing on your systems and that information is compromised in some way, there's quite a bit of case law that is starting to come out that says that you might actually be responsible for that if you don't have something in place to help protect it. They call those reasonable steps to protect them. And I put that in quotes because reasonable is fluid, okay? One of the things that they've mentioned in a lot of these cases is that if you had the mitigating identity theft protection benefits already in place, then it mitigates a lot of the damages, and a lot of times you can get out of that lawsuit without having to pay a lot of money. So that's one of the major things that you can put in place and just have it available. The IRS a few years ago made these types of benefits tax deductible if the company pays for them. So it's almost a win-win situation for you from a liability point of view. But talk to somebody about that. If you don't have any of that in place, we can help you with that. Last thing, get a law firm. If you don't have a law firm in place to stand beside your company, you need one right now. And I don't know many companies that don't have at least somebody that they've been asking questions to, but you need to have a corporate or business law firm that's right beside you, or a business legal plan. One of the things Todd's going to talk about here in a few minutes is business legal plans that you can get that'll actually help save you some money on having that attorney with you to ask all of these different questions to. So I'm going to turn it over to Todd. That's kind of my part of it, and he's going to talk to you about the actual identity theft issues that are going on right now.
So as you probably have noticed, a lot of this has to do, and a lot of our coaching right now to employers and to you guys today is, make sure you double down. Right now is a good time to do two things. Double down on your policies, making sure that they're clear, that they're up to date, that they don't reflect what you were doing 5 years or even 2 years ago. And number two, double down on the communication to your employees and from your employees. Get them to acknowledge to you that they understand what you expect out of them. Whether they're working in your office, which was easier, by the way. It's always easy. It's very structured. We always understood that, but especially if they're working remotely. So a good time to double down on those two things. So really, I'm going to do a rather short part of this because, identity theft, many of us, it used to be we had to explain this, but we don't really have to explain a lot of this anymore. I do want you to understand a couple of things. When it comes to identity theft, a lot of people they think of like a bank account or a credit card, something like that. And you see commercials on TV, hear them on the radio, and it makes you think that. But I want you to understand something. About 80% of the ID thefts that happen in the United States right now are non-financial. That means that you cannot detect it in your finances. If it happens to you, something really bad is going to happen. And I want you guys in trucking to understand, this is our mantra anywhere around the trucking industry, that 1 in 3 of the ID thefts that happen right now relate to your driver's license, okay? It can be simple things, and I've had many trucking companies, safety managers, when I'm sitting with them, they say, oh yeah, that's happened to us quite a few times, where all of a sudden a driver doesn't have a license. That license is gone. Or they find out they've got 2 DUIs in a state they've never driven in. Nick and I've had that happen many times, where a driver suddenly is unable to drive, and they find out either while they're at the side of the road for what they thought was a traffic ticket, or maybe they're in a weigh station, or they're getting their CDL renewed, and that's not the time to find these things out. So I wanted to kind of lay the foundation there that most of the ID thefts are thieves that are using this for non-financial reasons. And right now, in the middle of everything that's going on with the COVID crisis, we saw a big uptick in scams, online scams, as well as just flat out very bold identity thefts. But they're all ticking up, and they're taking advantage of two things that have come about in the crisis, and that is the combination of time and fear. And that people do really bad things when they're fearful. And unfortunately, there's a segment of society that will take advantage of that. Okay. I'm not, Nick and I you will find us not to be very pessimistic, but we're really, really realistic, especially when we're talking to you guys. You have people you're responsible for, and we just want to pass this on. Another good communication piece, that when it comes to your health, your finances, or your employment, people, when you're scared about any one of those things, you do maybe the dumber things that you've ever done in your life. I've done them when I'm in those positions, and your employees, you need to be aware, will do that. Your employees right now or have had increased time on their hands. And as Nick said, they're kind of not on guard as much if they're working remotely or they're working more in their home. It's just more of a less disciplined atmosphere, and increased online time expose you to more scandals. And by the way, the thieves know this. If you look at the identity theft industry, many of us think of, even this picture we're seeing here is the little, what looks like a teenager in a hoodie. But I'm just going to tell you something. Identity thieves see themselves as an industry, and they are. They're a well thought out, well funded industry. And our identity, that's their inventory. So they buy and sell our identities for all kinds of things. So when times come along like this, they know that they can up the game and get us to release more information. Online scandals are increased right now, and phone scandals are at their highest right now. Anything from utility scandals. I actually had a call from a tax entity a few weeks ago. Or excuse me, not tax entity, our utilities company, telling me that they were shutting off our utilities in 60 minutes if I did not push number 2 and go on through and get my bill paid. And by the way, that bill that they gave me, they said I owed not thousands of dollars they were trying to get a hold of, just $358 was the number. And you know what? That $358, that sounded like a reasonable amount of money. So I want you to understand, these scams don't always go for the throat. They don't always go for you spending, tens of thousands of dollars. Although in the last year, we've had 2 of them that hit people up for like 9, 10 to 10,000. And a lot of times they seem very, very reasonable. So coach your employees again. What can we do about this thing? Well, we can avoid unknown offers. Again, you coach your employees. Communication is of utmost importance right now. Coach your employees to not respond to things that are like health products or banking or utilities, emails that are coming your way. If you get a phone call, just hang up and call them back at the number that you know. So when it was Duke Energy that called us, I called them back for 2 reasons. Number one, we're onto this, but I'm even careful even knowing that I'm onto it. But the number 2 reason is I wanted them to know that was going on, okay, and they can take their action on it. But be wary of these things. Be wary of website URLs. Remote work from home exposes, as Nick was talking about, exposes you to scams on another level, all right? Let me tell you about one where an Indianapolis company, the CFO was fooled by an email that came to him supposedly from their CEO. In the end, it turned out that the thief was actually shadowing. They had a security leak at that company, and they were shadowing that CEO's email box. And they wrote an email to the CFO of the company asking for all of the W-2s from the year before for all 5,000 employees, because he was going to go, he had to meet with the bank over their financing, their line of credit at 2 o'clock that afternoon. Well, here's the thing. That was not sent by the CEO. When the CFO went down the hall later in the day. He was rather surprised to see the CEO in there at around 2 o'clock. And when he asked him, he said, "I don't have any idea what you're talking about." And he had sent off the all of the W-2s to an email address that was one letter off of the CEO's actual email address. Just understand, these people are really good. By the way, it had their logos, had the CEO's signature in it, and it was regular interaction between them. So coach your people. I tell you that story because you need to coach your people that these people are really a lot better. We might sit here, we've had this happen before, by the way, when we're speaking in person, someone say, "Well, I would never fall for that." And I'm going to tell you, if that's your attitude, you'll be the guy, because the fact is that we got to watch this stuff. These people are really, they're great at their job. Just like you guys are great at your job, they're great at their job. So understand that and coach it to your people. Clicking can install malware. They can steal your identity in a snap. I mean, they can reach into your computer and it's game over. Like Nick was talking about that one example earlier, you know, with the emergency management services. That was already done. Damage already done. We've seen many of these breaches, even up to the military breaches of the past many years, that the damage is already done. We want to caution you on opening unexpected emails. It may be something you think, "Oh yeah, I've already got that." You might actually want to start inviting somebody. We have partners, we don't do this ourselves, but inviting someone to try and get into your systems, try and get your employees to answer, to click on these. There are services that are very inexpensive that will test this and will test your company about these things. On these donation scams, that's a big one over the past couple of months, because obviously everybody's got a big heart. They want to help someone, and there's a lot of this going on. GoFundMe's that don't really have anybody at the other end. So I want to caution you on this. Again, make sure you're paying attention to this and make sure you're talking to your employees about these things. We also, I'm going to get into, if I have a pitch on this, I'm going to show you a couple of things that we do. So on the ID theft side, as Nick said, we believe we could choose from any products out there, and this really isn't a product pitch at you, but get a firewall out in front of you. And I'm going to tell you why we use this one right here, why we use ID Shield. It's because, number one, they've had the longest history of any of these products. And they do two very, very important things. Number one, whatever you do, make sure that it can monitor the things that really matter. For instance, this product here, the reason we use ID Shield, especially in trucking, by the way, is because it watches every Bureau of Motor Vehicles across the United States. So if we have a trucker in Ohio whose license is actually being used in New Mexico, and that person out there gets a DUI, that's going to show up and it's going to alert the driver here in Ohio that that was actually done. It's going to ask him, did you actually get a DUI in New Mexico yesterday? And he's going to have the chance to respond. The second thing that it does is it's got what's called limited power of attorney restoration. Make sure you've got a product that restores them to where they were before the breach, and make sure that it has investigators that actually know how to put them back. On the legal side, where Nick sits, he's a big advocate of this. Actually, this is why Nick is part of DataGuard now, is because if you, even if you have your own attorney there for the business and for personal, and by the way, special plans, especially for truck drivers, if you're in any of those categories, we have large law firms that we can give you access to for as little as, like, for your business, for as little as $39 a month. It's like absurdly low as far as this, and they will give you all of that consultation that Nick's been talking about in any area of law. And by the way, you don't get the same guy on the phone or same gal on the phone every time trying to cover all of the bases. They've got every single specialty covered for you. It's one of the reasons that we advocate for these plans, because it gets you to the right attorney for the exact problem you got going on, and it doesn't cost you anything else. That's really the biggest message here. By the way, if you're interested for the truck driving plans or any of that other stuff, you can call us, not a problem. Make sure at the end of the day, whether it's your own legal counsel that you're paying for, or one of these types of plans, which gives you, broader access, or a combination thereof, make sure that you've got good legal counsel right there beside you right now. This right now is changing. Everything is changing at breakneck speed. And you, of any time in your business right now, you need to have someone who can interpret what's going on these daily changes for you as best as you can. We invite you guys to call us and get in touch with us. We're happy to answer questions for you. Again, we really, really would love to get down there and meet some of you after everything settles down here a little bit. And if there's anything we can do for you, you can take down our number and give us a call or shoot us an email. Taryn, back to you. If we have some questions, by the way, we'll be glad to field those.
Thank you, gentlemen. I was just looking. I don't see any questions or comments, but remember, you can type those into the question and answer box down at the bottom. I really appreciate the thoroughness of your conversation today. It was really interesting, and it frankly confirms our fears on top of, you know, COVID, our portfolios, and business uncertainty. So remember what we talked about in the previous session yesterday about mindfulness. Just be wary and cautious as you're putting together your programs in-house. If you have any questions, do reach out to DataGuard through their contact information that's on the screen, or give us a call here and we can partner you up. That does it for today's session. We thank both father and son duo for joining us, and we look forward to hosting you here in beautiful South Carolina as soon as travel allows.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
I do want to take one quick second to once again just thank our South Carolina Trucking Association Truck Fund supporters: McGriff Insurance Services, Carolina International Trucks, Omnitracs, Bunch Truck Group, Christopher Trucks, Excel Truck Group, the Pete Store South Carolina, and Worldwide Equipment of South Carolina. Thank you. We have 2 more sessions this week, and we'll hope you will join us for those.